With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, we've leaned on him this entire midterm season. He's had a couple of weeks off with not a whole lot going on. Boy, did this make up for it, though, this past Tuesday. We got some big name races, a lot of stuff to go through. Joe Szymanski, he is the head of Elections Daily's daily race ratings team. He's one of these George Mason kids, but we'll forgive him that because he brings good information. How are you, sir? Great to have you back.
Oh, great to be back, Andrew. I am running on last night's energy and vibes right now, running about 4.5 hours of sleep from last night, but you know I love it.
Yeah, when we have these Western, one of the reasons we waited an extra day to cover this was these were Western races, especially Arizona and Washington, so we knew we weren't going to have the results. Let's just start right there. Big ticket item, Arizona, still waiting on some results. Where are we as of the recording of this afternoon of Wednesday for Thursday's program? Where are we at?
Yeah, so in Arizona right now, in the Senate race, obviously they had two key massive Republican primaries, the Senate primary to go up against Mark Kelly for the full term in that Senate seat, and as well as the governor's race to finish off against to replace Doug Ducey. The Senate primary on that side has already been called. Blake Masters, as expected, is the Republican nominee there. However, in the gubernatorial race, we have not yet called, no one has yet called that race. Kari Lake, the Trump-endorsed former anchorwoman who's gone through a certain amount of controversy, is up by about 11,300 votes right now. It's not a big lead right now for Lake. What we're mainly waiting on right now, it seems like, is late arriving votes in from Maricopa County. It'll be very interesting to see. These are apparently early votes I've seen online. We're still waiting on some election day vote for some of these places, but otherwise right now, it seems like this is all going to be coming down to the late arriving early vote in Maricopa County, and we'll depend to see. Robeson, from what I've been told, needs to win that batch by about 6.5 points. If she does, she will overtake Lake. If she does not, then Kari Lake is the nominee, and thus setting up that race in Arizona.
Now, of course, we've been talking about Maricopa County since 2020 election because that was ground zero for all the hot mess out in Arizona. Kari Lake has been talking about it nonstop. The MAGA wing of the Republican Party has been talking about it nonstop. If this lingers, Kari Lake was starting with election nonsense before this. They even started voting on Monday and Tuesday. How ugly is this going to get the closer it is? Do we need a definitive winning just for the good of the voting public here, or is this going to devolve and get really ugly really fast?
Yeah, if this stays a close race, this is undoubtedly going to get ugly. Reports say that Lake has already hired the notorious fake lawyer Jenna Ellis to potentially defend her or to litigate voting results in Arizona come this primary. So it'll be really, really interesting to see kind of what comes from that there. Because, you know, like I said, if these Maricopa ballots, even if, you know, Robeson doesn't win them by enough, if she wins them and thus, you know, tightens this race down to 1% or maybe even less than that, then this is going to be a very, very close election. Very much like the Pennsylvania Senate race, where it's not going to be done yet, potentially for another couple of weeks here as we kind of go through the motions of potentially dealing with a recount.
Does this help or hurt the Republican chances going forward? There's already been talk about if it's Kari Lake, because of all the controversy, because of all the baggage, that might change this race a little bit. If this drags on, though, does that hurt them going into the general election and what's probably going to be a pretty tight one?
I think it's a pretty undeniable thing that it would hurt the Republican Party in Arizona. I mean, the Arizona Republican Party is as a structure is already kind of weak as it is currently. You know, I think a continued long drawn out primary count here, and especially in this gubernatorial race, especially with Kari Lake being right in the center of it, it would be damaging, I think, to the general election, and I think it could potentially make things very volatile for November. Obviously, we've seen candidates come together before under tough circumstances, but this has been a bloody race already. If we continue to see it get bloodier after the count, This is going to be hard to, I think, come together for the November election in Arizona for sure.
Katie Hobbs is awaiting. She won the Democratic primary very handily. It was a quick call for her. Oddly enough, she's technically in charge of these elections, although there's some nomenclature there to be involved. How do you rate it? I know it's hard to do, and we don't know the person yet, but where's this race going to stand? In fact, just do it one way or the other. Is there going to be a mark? Is this like one of those things like Mastriano where it could swing it one way or the other just because of who the nominee is, or is this just going to be a bloodbath all the way through?
Personally, I think even if it's Kari Lake, the big difference between this race in Pennsylvania is that Katie Hobbs is no Josh Shapiro. Hobbs has some baggage of her own. There's been a lot of claims coming from her office of Secretary of State and from her campaign of a very bad work environment, of a potentially abusive work environment. There's been claims of discrimination from her Secretary of State office, from former employees there. Even with Kari Lake, Hobbs is not as strong as, say, a Josh Shapiro in terms of, just general cleanliness, I would say, in terms of scandal. Hobbs does have some baggage to her. She's certainly not a perfect candidate for Arizona Democrats. Honestly, if Karen Taylor Robeson were to pull this out, looking at the candidates themselves and looking at Arizona as a state, you could, in theory, actually make a stronger argument for leans Republican in that regard than you could for toss-up, even if I think Lake versus Hobbs. This is still a toss-up race. This is still Arizona. We should not forget how close this state was in 2020. This was a state that was decided by only 11,000 votes, people. Let's be, especially in the presidential election, this was an 11,000 vote race. Let's be very, very clear and honest where we find ourselves on that stand. This is going to be a close race in this open gubernatorial race with no incumbent with what's going on. It's going to be a tight race. This is a toss-up race, even if Kari Lake's the nominee.
All right, let's finish up Arizona over on the Senate side. There's some undercard stuff that's not quite. We'll revisit that later because we're gonna be talking about Maricopa County and the election stuff at a future date. But for now, big picture stuff. Blake Masters won his race. Mark Kelly is waiting for him. It's not gotten a lot of press, but Mark Kelly has been an absolute money print for the Democratic Party. He is one of the best fundraisers they have. He has gobs of money. The way the primary has gone down, he's just kind of been riding along, not really being involved in anything. Blake Masters has got a lot of backing. He's one of Peter Thiel's guys. He's at camp with J.D. Vance and some other ones. This is going to be a very expensive fight. I suspect this one gets ugly in a hurry. How do you rate it?
Right now, this is definitely a toss-up race. Again, even with Masters, and Masters is another one who could arguably have some baggage. There are some past quotes from past articles and things he's written. There's some current quotes now from the campaign. There's a quote that he said that he would defund Social Security, which, while I'm sure there are multiple Republicans out there who would support the idea of that, in a state like Arizona where there are numerous elder individuals that make up the voting base, there is a lot of boomers that depend on Social Security for that fixed income. That is a problematic statement for sure. This is still a toss-up race, though I would say that the fundamentals would support Kelly a little bit more in terms of potentially making this a leans Democratic race than, say, the gubernatorial race does. Kelly is an incumbent. And again, I want to mention 2020 again. I want to bring this up. Don't forget that Kelly did overperform Joe Biden by a pretty significant amount in Arizona in 2020 when he was running concurrently in that special election against Martha McSally. It was he ran about 1.5 points above Joe Biden in that regards. I don't think that's something that should be overlooked either in regards to this race. Kelly does seem to potentially have some semblance of a stronger, ability as a candidate, maybe especially around the Tucson area. He was relatively stronger than Biden was there in that Tucson area, especially in 2020. So that's going to be a key area here in this 2022 race, is going to be that Tucson area around Pima County. That'll be a key area to see if Kelly continues of overperformance there, or if he's kind of dragged down into a much closer race thanks to the environment that we potentially be expecting.
One last note on Arizona. It's not been talked about because the people that are running for office has been sucking up all the attention. What's Doug Ducey's future, do you think? He appeals to certain parts of the Republican Party. He's had some success as governor by certain metrics. Some of the other he hasn't even gotten really in all the stuff about the election stuff. That all kind of went on underneath him. He seemed to be able to stay above that to a large extent. What do you reckon his future is? The next step for that guy is? He's kind of in an interesting spot, isn't he?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk that Ducey is looking to 2024 as a time where he could run for Senate. If he decides he wants a future in politics, that's basically it for him. He's certainly no sure thing to win that primary in 2024, but from what I've heard, that is currently his target right now. Is that 2024 race against Kirsten Sinema and or Ruben Gallego when that Democratic primary will almost assuredly go down in 2024.
I'll give him respect just for waiting after ending his governorship before jumping to another race. I'll give him that much. And that is a primary that is going to be very ugly. So there is a very good chance, even in a purple state that's very contentious. That ain't bad strategy at all, is it? Because Sinema is definitely going to be a target by her own party, isn't she?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, Ruben Gallego, the current, I believe he is the seventh. No, he is the third district now. They redid some of the numbers. Excuse me. So he is now the third district rep under the renumbering of Arizona's congressional district. He's the third. He's part of the Phoenix area, and he's relatively progressive. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where that race lies because he's been basically trending towards challenging Sinema since the middle of the year. So we'll see where that goes when we get there in the next year and a half.
Okay, the feel-good story for those of us that follow politics and have anything vaguely resembling integrity and a conscience and a soul. Let's go over to Missouri real quick, the show me state. Before we even get into it, thank God Eric Greitens lost. And he lost soundly. It wasn't even close. He was a distant third. I don't want to even get into all of it. He, of course, resigned as governor. He's had more scandals since then. He's embroiled in a really ugly divorce custody case with even more abuse allegations. Boy, this is just a good old-fashioned win for America in good faith, don't you think?
I would have to say definitely a early evening sigh of relief. Missouri counted relatively quickly in regards to most of the other states that we saw last night. That's because Missouri, compared to most of the other states that we saw last night, actually has a pretty limited early and mail-in voting period. So most of the votes that we saw from the get-go were election day votes in Missouri. That allowed for a pretty quick counting process. By around 9 p.m., it was pretty clear that Eric Schmidt was going to be a Republican nominee, and by a pretty soundly way, too. Greitens, actually, he would have been projected to be in second by a good chunk of late polling. In the end, he fell in third. Vicky Hartzler, you could actually argue, probably overperformed in her congressional district area a little bit, in the central part of the state as well, too, around Columbia, the Jefferson City area. She maybe overperformed her expectations there a little bit. But Eric Schmidt ran away in the St. Louis area and those exurban suburbs there, crucial to the Republican vote there. Totally ran away in that eastern part of the state. And that's what really drew him to victory. And certainly a big sigh of relief for Republicans that Eric Schmidt will be joining fellow former Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley in the halls of the United States Senate. Almost certainly, we have this ready to Safar. The only candidate that we would have even considered moving this race away from Safar with is with Greitens, and he is far, far away from that Senate seat now. So Eric Schmidt, almost certainly, I don't want to say certainly because you never know, but almost certainly will be heading to the United States Senate to replace Roy Blunt after the 2022.
And the thing about that is Cook agreed with you. They actually swung this as soon as this was announced. They had the same feeling that Greitens would have put this in danger. He's going to go up against Trudy Bush Valentine. That's not Bushes in the Texas Bush. That's Bushes in the Anheuser dynasty Bushes. But since he's probably going to win and he's favored to win, who is Eric Schmidt? Because we spent a lot of time talking about all the others. Trump endorsed both Erics, kind of somewhat funnily. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. We'll just leave that for some other time. Who is this guy, though?
Eric Schmidt is the current Attorney General of Missouri. He's actually been described as one of the more right-wing Attorney Generals in America. But he kind of got his gains back after post-Roe, after the post-Dobbs decision, actually. He took a lot of advantage of that, pretty much acted immediately to basically ban abortion in the state of Missouri. Since that moment in, around, what was that, June, late May, early June, when that occurred, when that decision was handed down. Late June when that decision came down officially from the Supreme Court. Schmidt acted very quickly. That brought up a lot to him. That brought him certainly a lot of notoriety among the the Missouri gubernatorial base here. This is a guy who has certainly basically done the job here that you would think a Republican attorney general would do if he'd want to run for higher office here. And that's basically it. He'll be another relatively right-wing member of the GOP Senate caucus, not probably extreme right-wing, but he'll be another incredibly right-wing member of that caucus, as to be expected when you come from a state like Missouri. He'll be certainly part of that more conservative wing of that Senate caucus on the Republican side.
Big picture, we talked about Arizona being a swing state now. Georgia's looking like it's getting a little more purple as you go. Missouri's gone the other way. It used to be a swing state. I don't think we can call it a swing state anymore, can we?
No, I mean, it looked pretty gone in 2016 after Trump pretty massively overperformed expectations there. 2018, obviously, then Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill lost her race for re-election in the United States Senate to Josh Hawley, even though it was a Democratic wave year. Again, 2020, a pretty heavy Republican sweep. 2022 is off the radar. It's been a very quick shift to Missouri. There's been some gains in the St. Louis suburbs, but not nearly enough to change from the dark but not super dark red to now the very, very dark red, basically everywhere else but Kansas City, parts of Missouri now. A lot of these other exurban and rural areas have shifted very heavily to Republican Party, and it's going to make it very, very hard for Democrats to win that state in any race, quite honestly, for probably a little while here.
Yeah, Joe Szymanski, elections-daily.com. They do great work. They actually had to take a break in the live stream last night because it's so long. Make sure you're watching their live stream coverage of these things. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got a couple more states. Kansas, probably the shocking result of the night, at least on the commentariat. Very surprising result out there. Didn't have anything to do with a candidate either, just a real hot button issue. State of Washington, a couple other things we're going to talk about. Joe Szymanski on Heard Tell right after this break. Welcome back to Heard Tell. We're talking to our good friend Joe Szymanski. He's our go-to guy out of elections-daily.com. Let's go to Kansas. This was the shock of the night for a lot of people, and it was a ballot initiative. It was a constitutional amendment. It was called the Value Them Both Amendment. I'm going to read the amendment, and then we'll get into it. It was, quote, a yes vote on the measure would remove from the state constitution the right to an abortion and hand the issue back to the state legislature. A no vote on the measure would make no changes, keeping abortion rights enshrined in the state constitution. Again, this is Kansas. It went down almost 60-40-ish. This was kind of really a shock to a lot of people. We don't always talk ballot initiatives with you, but this is a big part of elections, these ballot initiatives, and this one really surprised folks.
Yeah, so, this was part of the post-Dobbs era. Kansas was the first state to throw abortion on a referendum ballot to send it to the people, and the people pretty clearly gave their answer on this. It wasn't really necessarily tracking for an abortion ban. It was just taking the right to an abortion out of the Kansas Constitution. Even that failed to a certain extent because I think the growing concern is that would immediately go to then a direct abortion ban in some capacity in the state of Kansas. Surprisingly, and I say this certainly with some amount of sarcasm, but surprisingly, people don't like going straight to a direct ban of things to something that's been available for the past 50 years. People don't like going to a direct ban on it for everything, potentially, even in serious cases of rape or incest or health of the mother. People don't like that. And voters don't like that. We've known that for a long time. And Kansas voters, even in this deep red state, certainly showed that last night. And I think the total margin was a surprise to me. I wasn't necessarily surprised that it failed, but the total margin was certainly a surprise to me. A loss of about 18 points for this referendum right there. Certainly a statement by Kansas voters, that's for sure, on the state of what they wanted to look for in this referendum.
Abortion is such a hot topic because everybody's got really deep entrenched. We're not changing a lot of people's minds on abortion. But data-wise, election-wise, we're starting to get some trends going here. Abortion, it means how you define the abortion, because if you just say abortion, people think different things. It's really starting to look like when you go to the ballot box in the general public, whether it's a red state, blue state, or whatever, late term abortion, folks are pretty well against that. You start getting down in that 15, 12-week area, that's when people start pushing back. And then you get below that, it kind of switches. We seem to have, although it's a hot debate, we seem to have some numbers that we have a pretty well defined spectrum here of where the public is at on this, don't we?
I think I cannot disagree with that in any way. That's certainly the case, and yeah, it's again. I think last night is a very, very clear statement from the people of Kansas to what they're looking for on this issue. I think it's a very, very clear statement, undeniable what they're looking for, and again, just an incredibly clear statement on the issue, which is going to give both parties something to consider now going into these final run-up months of the campaign here.
All right, there was some actual elections involving people there too. Senator Jerry Moran got his opponent, Democrat Mark Holland, won a three-way race. How is Senator Moran looking for the general election?
Jerry Moran, this is Kansas. Even though it did what it did on that abortion amendment, this is still a very, very safe race. Moran is a relatively popular incumbent here. He should have absolutely zero trouble in victory and winning Kansas when the time comes on election night. He's very, very safe for re-election.
Incumbent Laura Kelly, she's getting a challenger, Republican Derek Schmidt. In the fall, he won his race pretty handily. Any chance this governorship flip? We haven't been talking a lot about governorships because the Senate's going to be very, very tight, especially with some of the candidates the GOP has nominated. We're pretty sure the House is going to flip. These governorships matter. They matter a lot. We haven't been talking about them as much. What about this Kansas governorship race?
Yeah, it's been one of the premier gubernatorial races. I did an article about recently at how incumbent governors are incredibly tough to beat. Even in midterm years, there's only been about an average of 2 to 3 since 2002 that have fallen. There's been basically on average about 2 per midterm cycle that lose in midterm cycles. Laura Kelly could be one of them. This is a red year, still Kansas. Derek Schmidt is certainly no Chris Kobach. What Kelly does have in her favor is pretty strong approval ratings. It's been very, very hard to beat gubernatorial candidates with strong incumbent governors with good approval ratings in past years. It's happened before, but it's incredibly rare for it to happen. This is going to be a close race. We have it at lean Republican at Elections Daily. We might be thinking about moving that back to toss-up in recent days. We'll see what we do come Monday when we release our next ratings update. But however, this is going to be one of the closer gubernatorial races, but it is also probably still Republicans' best chance at flipping a governor's mansion as things stand right now in America.
Interesting name on the undercard from those of us that are still having nightmares about 2020. You just mentioned him, Chris Kobach. He was kind of the Greetings of the life cycle, although he's not as bad of a human being as Greetings. They didn't want him on the ticket then. He lost his Senate race. He's mounting his comeback. He won his primary for state AG. He's going to be facing Democrat Chris Mann. Kobach got a little comeback going, or is this going to be a dead end for him, do you think?
I mean, it depends on what he does with it. Attorney General can obviously be a very active role. Kobach has certainly shown before that he will take active roles in these row offices before in Kansas. He did as Secretary of State. He will almost certainly will as Attorney General. But he's got to kind of serve out that term first, and we'll see what he does. Because Kobach, with this primary win, is certainly not gone from our shores yet in terms of the political world.
Darn. It makes for good copy, but I'm sure some of the Republican Party in Kansas are kind of tired of this. Let's go up north, Michigan. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the Governor Gretchen Whitmer has been very high profile over the last years for a couple of different reasons. The COVID stuff, we had the bizarre case of the kidnapping plot against her. She's up for re-election. She has her challenger now. Tudor Dixon, a businesswoman and a conservative commentator, won a really messy primary that actually involved some people getting kicked off the ballot, but we can talk about that in a minute. Dixon was a Trump endorsee, not really well known. Got some DeVos backing, which, of course, that's a lot of money. Where's this race going to be sitting at, do you think?
Right now, we have it at lean Democratic. There again, Whitmer is another one of those incumbent governors that has a pretty solid approval rating right now from the people of Michigan. The other issue right now, as well as you mentioned, this was just such a messy primary. on the Republican side. Dixon, in the end, comes out of it clean. She was kind of the best of the rest after James Craig and Perry Johnson got kicked off the ballot due to massive signature fraud that was committed by people on their campaign. Which is never a smart thing to do. Don't commit signature fraud, folks. It's actually very easy to find out by the laws of our elections. But Dixon was kind of the best of the rest considering the field. It'll be very interesting to see how she does, of course, in this campaign. Michigan Republicans also nominated some very, I guess you could say, interesting people for Attorney General and Secretary of State that probably won't make Dixon's job easier. Of the three states in the Rust Belt that Joe Biden flipped back from Donald Trump in 2020, Michigan was the state he won by the most. It has kind of the most blue elements around it. You have a strong city, you have some swinging suburbs. Grand Rapids and Kent County, you see it swinging towards them. You've got the Oakland and Wayne suburbs switching very heavily towards Democrats now. We really need to kind of see where this goes here. Michigan, certainly Dixon has a chance, certainly she does. But right now we see Whitmer as a slight favorite.
Yeah, my favorite tidbit on Dixon was the AP at the bottom described her as a former steel industry executive, I'm reading here, who also hosted a conservative program on a streaming channel and once acted in a low-budget zombie movie in what her campaign described as, and this is a quote, admittedly lame hobby. So no shortages of characters there. One last thing about Michigan, I have to ask you, because we're going to be talking about this in a year or two. There is a new registered voter, or I should say a couple of them, because they are a couple, but I think the new registered voter in the state of Michigan in the next few years might be something to keep an eye on as we're looking at some of these races go back Democrat and wide open. There's one certain transportation secretary that has moved his flag to Michigan. He's got to work. We're talking about Pete Buttigieg. We know the numbers from 2020. He's got to work on minorities. He's got to work on disparate groups, lower classes groups. Michigan got a bunch of them. What do you see the future of him there? Because that's not accidental.
I'd say certainly him moving to Michigan is at least a sign that he is at least considering running for office again. If he had stayed in Indiana, I'd say that means he was over, other than potentially another presidential run. But the fact that he is moving to a state like Michigan, or if he had moved to Virginia, either or would have been a signal to me that he is looking for another run in office. He certainly could if he wants to. Let's not speculate here. We've still got 2024 and 2026 to look forward to. But if he's not on the ticket in some way in 2024, it's not hard for me to see him running for governor in 2026 to either against Judah Dixon or to replace the term-limited Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah, and there's some whispers about Whitmer getting bumped up, whether she wins governor or not. There's a lot. She's very well liked in the Biden administration and the Democratic Party, so she may be moving on before the end of her term either which way. Let's go out way west to Washington real quick as we wrap up what happened last night. Senator Patty Murray got her challenger now, Republican Tiffany Smiley. Doesn't seem to be in a whole lot of danger there, but stranger things have happened. How do you have that one?
We have it rated as likely Democratic right now. Republicans have shown some interest in Smiley. And I do want to hold some caution here. There's only about 48% of the vote counted right now in Washington State. They released their mail-in ballots very slowly. Hopefully we get some more today around 8 Pacific time. Now, if we don't, the next rumored date isn't until Friday. So it should be said as well that usually statewide, the later ballots are from more right-wing leaning. So we could see that kind of that Democratic margin that we see in that race right now shrink down. However, I do think with this early drop, I think Murray's put herself in a pretty good position right now here. It's pretty hard to see this race being truly competitive like it was maybe in 2010 when she faced a pretty legitimate challenge from Dino Rossi, where she only won by about 4.5 points that year in that red wave cycle in 2010.
One other interesting tidbit, because they do top 2 voting in the state of Washington, found it interesting. Secretary of State, they've actually got an independent that came in second there. Kind of odd for a state that's kind of known to be a Democratic stalwart, don't you think?
Well, again, this is they base. I should say that Democrats only who have an incumbent there, and Steve Hobbs. He's taking that first spot right now. Again, only about 48% of the vote counted right now. So it's going to be interesting to see who kind of takes that second spot currently between to face off against Tubbs. The Washington Secretary of State office has been one that has actually been held by Republicans in Washington for the last 50 years. It's been one of their few statewide row offices they've held past the 80s, 90s, when things took a turn for the worse in the state of Washington for them. But it'll be very interesting to see kind of where this race goes. It's the independent Anderson, and that certainly changes the race on its head a little bit. And it'll be kind of interesting to see where that race lies come November. It'll be very interesting to see where that race lies, I would say for sure.
What do we got to look forward to going forward? This was kind of the last of the big gloppy ones, but there's still some voting to do in there.
Yeah. So there are still I would say that that August is kind of really the kind of the last real big key month, that's for sure, normally, as it typically is throughout the month. I do want to say Thursday, actually, we just do what have on Thursday, actually, that Tennessee will go vote. Tennessee, of course, the 5th district is a newly gerrymandered Republican district. Cut out the area around Nashville basically cut up Nashville into multiple Republican districts, and now giving the Republicans a new seat. The 5th district is now a Republican leaning seat. They can see who their nominee is for that there. It'll be interesting to see as well here. Other weeks coming up here, August 9th, I believe there are some key primaries as I look at the primary calendar dates here that I have on it here. Yeah. August 9th, we'll have some interesting primaries. Wisconsin is on August 9th, as well as Minnesota and Connecticut. There'll be some interesting races to look at there when it comes to those nights. August 16th, that is Liz Cheney's night. That's Wyoming's primary that night. So that'll be really interesting to see that night as well. And then August 23rd, that's really the last big night we have. That's Florida and those New York congressional primaries that were delayed because of the forced redraw of their maps. So really, we've kind of got the 9th, one state on the 16th in Wyoming, and then the 23rd. The 23rd is really going to be our last big night of primaries before we drive into that general election cycle.
And we'll be talking to you throughout all of it. Joe Szymanski, always great stuff. Let everybody know about Elections-Daily, what you've got going on, and where they can follow you on your social media until we get you back again.
Yeah, so you can Elections Daily. You can follow at Elections_Daily on Twitter. We do every night. There's election night. We'll be out there on live stream on our YouTube, Elections Daily, or on Twitter. We live stream there as well. And you can follow me at Joseph Szymanski, all one word. That's SZYMANSKI for the last name. Andrew, thank you for having me on once again tonight.
We'll keep doing it. We got all those things linked to the show notes, so you can find him and all his compatriots. They are a riot to watch. Always appreciate you, my friend. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.